Elmer Ray was a hard-punching heavyweight out of Florida in the 1940s. He reached his peak during a time when champion Joe Louis was away in the Army during World War II and never received a title shot. Now, Ray's exact date of birth remains a mystery, although it is most often listed as March 3rd, 1911. He grew up in Hastings, Florida, earning a living by fighting, picking cotton, and wrestling alligators. Now, Ray was discovered by Charlie Burley's manager, Tom O'Laughlin, in New Orleans. O'Laughlin entered a bar and complained to the bartender that he couldn't find any good fighters to face Burley. The bartender directed him outside, introducing him to a muscular man who sat on the hood of a Model T eating an apple. "I put him in against Burley," O'Laughlin said, figuring Burley would get a good workout against a tough heavyweight. "Only Elmer," he called himself Elmo, "almost killed my boy. Elmer's fighting in a pair of flour sack trunks and tennis shoes with no socks." O'Laughlin later learned that Ray was already a professional boxer, with a 39-win, 18-loss, and 11-draw record, fighting under the name of Bearcat Ray. He was also a winner of over 21 battle royals in New Orleans, one time knocking out 9 straight opponents with one hand tied behind his back. O'Laughlin saw nothing technical about Ray. He was crude, awkward, but a hard hitter who kept throwing punches. O'Laughlin put Ray in a 10-rounder against Turkey Thompson, but Ray was knocked out by Thompson's first punch. O'Laughlin figured that was that for the Florida strongman. But Ray was tired of picking cotton for a living. Now under the guidance of a connected but shrewd manager in O'Laughlin, Ray won 20 straight fights before calling out Joe Louis for an exhibition bout. In military service for the war, Louis refused, not wanting to take any unnecessary risks. "I can't box no exhibition with that Ray," Louis said. "That man can't do anything but fight. Maybe I can fight him later, but a boxing exhibition with him is impossible, 'cause he wouldn't know how to box back. He'd start swinging for keeps. One of us would get hurt." Ray stated that Louis was afraid. Angered by Ray's words, Louis iced him out of a title shot in the coming years. In March of 1945, Ray made a poor showing against Jimmy O'Brien at Madison Square Garden. O'Brien held, grabbed, danced, and prayed for a draw until a cut eye forced a stoppage in the 5th round. Fans then taunted both fighters, chanting the word, "bum." But Ray began touring the country, knocking out opponents from coast to coast, which earned him the nickname of Violent. His manager O'Laughlin called for matches against Lee Savold and Lee Oma, claiming that both were avoiding Ray. Always the promoter, O'Laughlin took one of Ray's sisters from Mississippi, who stood at 6'2" and was very good at working the speed bag. O'Laughlin had her put on a show in the gym, with sports writers reporting how O'Laughlin was getting her to fight Oma and Savold, since they wouldn't fight anybody but girls and bums. After stopping Joe Louis's sparring partner George Fitch in 5 rounds, Ray received his match against Lee Savold, knocking him out in 2 rounds. But Ray was now being advised by Bill Duffy, a bar owner who had also handled Primo Carnera. More than one news reporter smelled a fix. Others simply danced around the issue. Lester Bromberg wrote, "Savold was more violent than Elmer was violent. Lee can defend himself like an old master when he wants to, but his guard was lower than a black marketeer's morals." Bromberg further stated that Savold landed a flurry that might have been in the script, but then went back into his non-combatant status. A pair of boxing promoters from Argentina offered $500,000 to Louis if he defended his title against Ray in Buenos Aires. Louis declined. One writer pointed out that on the Elmer Ray Lee Savold poster, there was a picture of Joe Louis with a caption stating that he was afraid of Ray. The writer reported that 4 or 5 persons walked by and laughed out loud as they glanced at the poster. O'Laughlin then inked about for Ray against Jersey Joe Walcott, but according to the manager, the fans weren't buying it and they couldn't give tickets away. But one day both he and Ray were standing on the busiest street in New York. A truck passed, and all of a sudden, a big box fell out of the back, breaking open on the street. A 12-foot alligator was inside, now angry and bellowing at passers-by. Women screamed and children shrieked. But Elmo, dressed in a white suit with a red tie, rushed out into the street, saving a young boy from the hungry reptile. The story made the papers. A civic group wanted to nominate Ray for a Carnegie Medal for bravery, but O'Loughlin told him to refuse it. He instructed Elmer to tell the press that, quote, he was proud that he was able to save the lives of his white brothers in New York because, in the eyes of God, we are all brothers. Tickets for the Walcott bout then went through the roof, and at the time, it drew the biggest gate at Madison Square Garden for 2 black boxers in the headliner. O'Loughlin called the incident the miracle of the alligator and pled innocent to the rumor that he set the whole thing up, including the press photographers who just happened to be there at exactly the right time. Ray defeated Walcott by split decision in front of 18,000 fans at the Garden. Walcott was the 8-5 favorite, but by the 4th round, he was so groggy from Ray's punches that he had to be guided back to his corner by the referee. Ray bobbed and weaved behind his shell-like defense, smashing Walcott with heavy right hands. Ray stated that he would have won in a much more convincing fashion had he not suffered a torn ligament in his left shoulder in the 8th round. Manager O'Loughlin bragged to the press, stating that he had the man who could beat Joe Louis. Under his guidance, Ray had now won 48 straight fights, with 42 by knockout. But sports writer Tom Meaney led the chorus of those who were not impressed. Ray's knockout victims read like a page of boxing's Who's Almost Who, Meaney wrote. He has stiffened more unknowns than a hit-and-run driver. Ray rematched Walcott 4 months later and lost a majority decision. Ray then faced Ezzard Charles with the winner due a shot at Joe Louis's crown. Charles was a 2-1 favorite, but Ray took a split decision. Charles ran and held, with Ray being the aggressor. He's a good light heavyweight and fast, Ray said, but he couldn't knock my hat off. Ray then threatened to retire if Louis still refused to fight him. Why spend the rest of my life chasing him? Ray asked. But Ray didn't get his title shot. Nearly a year later, he faced Charles in a rematch and was stopped in the 9th round. The bout was held in Chicago Stadium a little over 2 months after Charles had fatally injured Sam Baruti in the same arena. Ray fell in nearly the same spot Baruti did only weeks earlier. Charles was sticking his thumb in Ray's eye, O'Loughlin said. We got a detached retina, and that was it for Ray. Ray retired less than a year later after suffering back-to-back defeats against Kid Riviera and John Holman. Ray suffered a concussion during the Holman bout, getting knocked out in the 9th round. I ain't gonna fight no more as long as I got that concussion, Ray said. I'm through. I've just fought too many fights too often recently. I got my good health, and I'm gonna keep it. Ray did get a pair of exhibitions against Louis in 1949, and in one of those bouts, Louis severely staggered Ray. O'Loughlin saw that Ray was having trouble with his eyes and co-signed on his retirement. Ray was now married and had a newborn son, but his post-boxing career remains a mystery. It was reported that he moved to Los Angeles and started his own trucking firm. Another report had him returning to Hastings, Florida, to work on a farm. A handful of sports writers searched for his whereabouts, all to no avail. What is known is that Elmer Ray passed away on May 20th, 1987.